Sophie Cunningham does not hold back and Clark does not either, so when both of them stood in front of cameras after Indiana's brutal 113-96 loss to Atlanta and started talking about their coach, everyone in that press room went quiet because what they said was not subtle and Stephanie White was standing right there. But before getting to that moment, you need to see the full game, because what happened on that court for 40 minutes is the only way to understand why Clark and Cunningham finally snapped. Clark came out on fire with 13 points in the first quarter on 5 of 6 shooting and 3 threes, making it look easy in a way that should terrify every other team in this league, as Indiana put up 39 points in that first quarter alone, which is a season high, and at one point they were up 11 on Atlanta with the Dream having no answer for any of it. And what made it scary was not just the scoring, because every time Atlanta tried to throw a double,
Stephanie White and Clark nearly fights every single game at this point. You will never see this on any level of basketball. But let's watch this. Like, look, she's rolling her eyes already. Look at this. Like, she's tired of you, Stephanie. I'm sorry, but she's tired. This is not good. At any point, this is not good. She's rolling her eyes, looking up at the scoreboard. Stephanie, you think you know what you're talking about, and you don't have a single
team at Clark. She had already seen it coming and the ball was gone, finding a cutter, hitting a teammate in rhythm, and pushing the pace before Atlanta's defense could reset, as she finished through contact, ran the break, and distributed the ball like someone completely locked in and playing with zero hesitation. So Indiana looked like a team that could beat anybody in the WNBA that night entirely because Clark was controlling the game from the jump. Atlanta did not figure out a way to stop her. And
the Indiana Fever were just decimated by the Atlanta Dream. Absolutely decimated. After Clark with a historic first quarter. A historic first quarter. She dropped 13 points in the first quarter. I mean, just look at this. 13 points in the first quarter. 5 for 6 from the field. 3 for 4 from the three-point. She's the GOAT.
Nobody on their coaching staff drew something up that slowed Clark down or changed what Indiana was doing offensively. So Atlanta kept getting torched and the Fever kept building the lead as the first quarter ended with Indiana looking like the better team by a wide margin, with Clark already having 19 points and 5 assists by the time the third quarter hit, with only 2 turnovers while still playing with that same aggression and efficiency she had from the opening tip. But then Stephanie White pulled her at the 8:41 mark.
Like, this is her. She was smiling at the end of the first quarter. You know what I'm saying? Happy as hell, hitting threes. Look at the defenders' faces looking like they was on the verge of crying, on the verge of tears. Terrified of this girl. Terrified that she was on pace to drop 52 points tonight, chat. 52 points. 13 points a quarter. And mind you, I don't even think she was done by that point. But this is Clark, man. This is who Stephanie White wants to continuously take away from the
of the third quarter, right after a Monique Billings foul on Jordan Canada, yanking Clark to the sideline and getting into an animated exchange with her while the Fever were up 5, and Clark was cooking with no injury, no foul trouble, and no obvious tactical reason to take your best player off the floor in the middle of a close game where she had been the only reason Indiana was ahead. But off she came, and what followed was a 13-0 Atlanta run that basically ended the game before the fourth quarter even started, as Indiana got outscored 28-5 in the third quarter total, and the lead they had built evaporated completely. The lineup White ran after pulling Clark did not space the floor better or create mismatches, as Atlanta's interior players started dominating the glass because nobody Indiana had out there could match their size, and the offense stalled out almost immediately because Clark was not there to create anything. With the three-guard look, White kept going back to just creating confusion while Atlanta took full advantage of every second of it, and White has talked about her 3A's philosophy of.
And then look right here, Caitlin's arguing with the coaching staff. She's trying to talk. I see she was talking to Austin Kelly right here once again. So instead of going straight to Stephanie White, and what is Stephanie White doing? Looking away from Clark. Now, habits told me one thing, is that whenever Stephanie White looks away from Clark while Caitlin is looking at Stephanie or approaching Stephanie, that usually means that Stephanie White was wrong.
Awareness, anticipation, and defense, which sounds fine when talking to reporters but is designed for a grinded-out defensive-minded team, not for a roster that has Caitlin Clark, who was literally on pace to score over 50 points if you just extrapolate her first quarter efficiency across a full game. Because you do not build your coaching system around limiting ball movement and managing minutes when your point guard is dropping 13 points in 12 minutes and making every right read. on the floor, and Clark sat on that bench and watched Atlanta extend the lead while White ran lineups that had no business being out there in a game Indiana still had a chance to win, with her frustration not being hidden as she ended the night with 26 points and 7 assists, which for most players would be a career night. And she got there despite the substitution pattern, and not because of it. Indiana committed 29 fouls in this game while Atlanta shot 31 free throws too.
Caitlin Clark is looking at Stephanie White to say, "I told you so." Stephanie White can never make eye contact with her. Caitlin Clark is always voicing her opinions to Austin Kelly because Stephanie White won't hear a damn thing.
Indiana's 21, meaning the Dream got 10 extra free throw attempts just because the referees decided to call the game one way and stick with it all night, and that is not a blowout in the making but a blowout being constructed one whistle at a time. Let's talk about Aaliyah Boston first, because her foul trouble did not just hurt Indiana on defense but gutted their entire game plan, as Boston picked up her third foul before halftime, which already had her playing cautious and hesitant in the second quarter when she should have been physical and aggressive, and she fouled out with 5 fouls while playing only 22 minutes total, and the moment she picked up that 5th foul late in the third quarter, the game got out of hand almost immediately, because Boston is the one fever player with the size and strength to battle Atlanta's interior. So when she is sitting on the bench watching, Atlanta's forwards and centers start eating since nobody left on the floor for Indiana can stop.
They called foul after foul after foul after foul when nobody was getting touched. But when Caitlin Clark did that same drive to the hole and was getting hit all game, they didn't call that foul. When Kelsey Mitchell goes up for a layup and is getting pulled from behind, her hand hits Ryan Howard in the face and she gets a technical. But when Angel Reese goes up for a layup and elbows somebody for the 3rd time in 2 games, no upgrade on Angel Reese.
And what made it worse is that Stephanie White refused to challenge Boston's 5th foul even though the contact on the play looked marginal and incidental to pretty much everyone watching. And when you have your best interior defender on 5 fouls in a game where Atlanta is winning the paint and you will not even burn a challenge to try to get that call overturned, that is not conservative coaching but giving up, and it handed Atlanta a free path to the basket for most of the 4th quarter. The pattern the referees ran all night went like this. Clark drives hard to the rim and absorbs contact from an Atlanta defender while the whistle stays quiet, but an Atlanta guard pulls up for a jumper and gets barely touched by a Fever player and it is an automatic foul call, and over Atlanta's interior players grabbed, held, and pushed Indiana's shooters off their spots without a single call going Indiana's way. But the second any Fever player got physical on defense, the refs were right there with the whistle ready, as Angel Reese,
Ooh. I mean, there's a push, but that feels like the kind of contact that happens.
Completely incidental.
Played the most physical game she has played all season, throwing her body around on the glass and in the post, and the refs rewarded her for it on one end while ignoring the exact same behavior on the other end when Indiana tried to match it, and that is 53 combined fouls called in this game, with the split between the two teams not being close, as Indiana's players spent the second half terrified of picking up another foul because they all knew one more whistle could send them to the bench, and that fear changes how you defend, how aggressive you were on the ball, and how willing you are to take a charge or fight through a screen, while Atlanta played with no such fear because the officials gave them room to be physical without consequences. So you end up with a 4th quarter where Indiana could not generate any defensive pressure at all, where Boston was stuck on the bench because White did not fight for her, and where the Fever's best lineup never actually shared the.
Watch this film, and I'm going to show you how the double standard is crazy. But both players hit Caitlin Clark's arms. She comes through and still makes the bucket. And then Angel Reese has something to say. Always. Like, she annoys me. Caitlin Clark hits a 3. I think that's the most open she's been the entire season. And look at, here's a moving screen. Do you see how she moves her leg out to get that screen on Caitlin Clark? That's an illegal screen.
Floor together, partly because of White's substitution decisions and partly because of the foul situation the refs manufactured across 40 minutes, and the broadcast framed it as a competitive loss that just got away from Indiana late, but the box score says something different as Indiana shot 21 free throws while Atlanta shot 31, and Clark scored 26 points without the refs ever giving her the line, driving into defenders and absorbing contact that would have sent any.
This is crazy. That was the first one I was just like, how's that a foul? Because watch this, Caitlin Clark's being held. 1, 2, 3, 4 seconds. Remember that, because you're about to see a whole bunch of ghost fouls. There's another one, Sophie Cunningham. Every single play, we're trying to build a lead, but we can't because the refs stop the game every single second when nobody's...
Atlanta guard to the stripe without a second thought. Even with all the referee problems and White pulling Clark at the worst possible moment, Indiana still found ways to hurt itself, and some of that damage came from players who should have been the solution. So let's talk about Aaliyah Boston, who missed layups in this game. Not tough contested finishes where a defender got a hand in her face, and not off-balance attempts from weird angles, but just open looks inside 5 feet that she has to convert if Indiana wants to stay competitive, as these were point-blank misses that turned into Atlanta fast breaks and possessions where Clark or Mitchell worked hard to get Boston a clean look in the paint and she just did not finish. And in a game Indiana lost by 17, those missed layups are not small but are the difference between staying in the fight and getting buried.
She fell down 5 times. Look at that, she wasn't even touched. The same one that got us last game for falling down every single play.
And Boston is genuinely one of the better interior players in this league when she is playing with confidence and rhythm. So the fact that she kept missing those close looks tells you something is off with how she is being used, because it is not a talent issue. Kelsey Mitchell scored 16 points total, but the way she got there and what she did in the second half are 2 completely different stories. Because in the second quarter alone Mitchell launched 7 shots more than any other Fever player.
Screen from Hines Allen. Clark draws 2, finds the cutter, it's Boston center the lane for the soft finish, and the foul.
In a single quarter all game, and a lot of those came in moments where Clark was open and already reading the defense perfectly, but the second half was worse as Mitchell went 0 for 3 from the field across 16 second half minutes and scored 0 points, and the bigger problem was not the missed shots but the dribbling, as she would bring the ball up and dribble repeatedly until by the time she made a decision the play was dead and Clark was standing on the wing watching it happen. And when your team's offense runs through Clark, you do not get to freelance for a full half and pretend you are running the offense. So nobody told Mitchell that, and that is a coaching failure as much as it is a player problem. Lexi Hull and Monique Billings both signed real money contracts this offseason, so their performance on June 20th is worth talking about plainly. Because Hull went through an offensive drought that covered pretty much the entire game without ever getting anything going. Or
Mitchell with a beautiful shot and drain. Mitchell on the way she can dance with the basketball, that time behind her back, pow pow.
Threatening Atlanta's defense in any way, while Billings picked up fouls early and spent critical minutes on the bench without making any kind of impact before she sat for good. So 2 players with big contracts combined for almost nothing, and Indiana needed both of them off the bench. 3 players actually showed up, as Sophie Cunningham finished with 13 points and hit 3 of her 8 3-point attempts, and more than the numbers, she brought physical energy that the starting lineup just was not generating by competing hard on every possession, getting after it defensively, and giving Indiana something real to work with, while Myisha Hines Allen gave the Fever interior presence and finished around the basket in ways Boston could not manage while fighting foul trouble, and Raven Johnson pushed pace, made smart decisions, and kept Indiana from falling apart completely during the stretches when the starters were struggling. So White's starting rotation underperformed while the players actually sparking Indiana came off the bench with something to prove, as Cunningham alone outscored Hull and Billings combined while playing fewer minutes than either of them, and that is a rotation problem that White keeps refusing to fix, with the players who are most fed up with it not hiding that frustration anymore, especially not after what happened in the postgame. The post-game press conference started the way they usually do after a bad loss, with reporters settling in, cameras adjusting, and the kind of quiet in the room where everyone is waiting to see who says what, as Stephanie White sat at the table and Clark sat right next to her, and you could read the frustration on Clark's face before she opened her mouth, with one broadcaster describing her as looking extremely frustrated and pissed while another said she was rolling her eyes already looking at the scoreboard like she...
Billings gives it up. Hull flags it down. Clark coming back to it. Circling, dishing, Hines Allen hitting on the jumper.
He was still doing the math on everything that went wrong, and Clark did not blow up but kept it professional. Yet the words she chose told the whole story as she talked about ball security and said the team did some really good things in the first half by playing in transition, spraying the ball, and finding open people. But then she described the second half by saying it is really hard to do that when all we do is foul and they score, and they did not play in transition at all in the second half because of that, which is Clark sitting next to her coach telling anyone paying attention that Indiana's second-half identity, the one White chose, killed everything that was working, and she did not name White but did not need to because every person in that room understood that the shift away from transition basketball was not something Clark did but something that got done to her offense. And she was done pretending otherwise. Cunningham backed her up, and Cunningham does not.
Look, we all know that this was weird. This is weird. I'll say this. That this was like one of these moments where it's like Caitlyn looked kind of done. Caitlyn just looked done with whatever Steph White said to her. This is like a what the fuck? No way. We all know that.
Cushion things the way Clark does, because where Clark stayed measured and chose her words carefully, Cunningham spoke directly about competing, about what winning actually requires from this team, and about the approach on the floor, and the room got quieter when Cunningham talked because she was not being diplomatic and everyone could feel it, as she has been one of the most physically competitive players on Indiana's roster all season, playing with an edge that White's rotation and system have not always rewarded, and the post-game was her saying out loud what her play on the court had already been saying for weeks, while White sat there and the cameras caught all of it, and what White said in response landed flat next to what Clark and Cunningham had just put on the table, with the gap between the two conversations telling you more than any quote could.
What we did well in the first half was play in transition, spray, find open people, and then it's really hard to do that when all we do is foul and they score. Like, we didn't play in transition at all in the second half because of that.
People who have watched this team all season were not surprised by any of it, because they had already seen Clark's frustration building on the sideline during those third-quarter substitutions, already seen Cunningham bring fire and competitiveness that the system keeps failing to use properly, and already watched Indiana run lineups that made no sense in close games while their best player watched from the bench. So the post-game did not reveal anything new but just confirmed it on camera with everyone watching, as Clark's 26 points and 7 assists against Atlanta were not a one-time thing she stumbled into but her floor, what she produces when the offense runs the way she described in the first half, fast and spread out, finding open players before the defense can recover, and White pulled her during a scoring run while Indiana got outscored 28-5 in the third quarter, which is not coincidence or bad luck but what happens when you yank the engine out of a car that is running well. And the 2026 window for this team is real because Clark is playing at a level where an MVP run is not a fantasy and the Fever have enough talent around her to compete for something serious. But every game where White treats Clark's strengths as things to manage rather than build around is a game Indiana hands to the other team before the opening tip, as Clark put up 26 points and 7 assists in a loss, got yanked during a scoring run, watched the refs gift Atlanta 31 free throws, and then sat next to her coach on camera while she and Cunningham said exactly what they thought, and White acknowledged after the game that Indiana's foul problems come from players being late and out of position, which is a coaching problem she is describing out loud without seeming to realize it.